McCartney had this sweet voice, Lennon had this slightly raspier voice. A little bit later on, George Harrison starts singing. We won't go into Ringo and Octopus's Garden, but they had different voices that they could bring to the table. Great vocalist that Jagger is, you know, variety is the spice of life, and I think it took some coaxing to persuade Keith that he could sing. But, you know, on the right song, his voice is incredibly effective.
The band had regained their strength, but with an American tour planned, the future of Brian Jones was uncertain. Hardly featuring on Beggar's Banquet, he was musically a spent force, and his inability to deal with the drugs rushing daily through his system could no longer be tolerated by his bandmates. Having lost his girlfriend and his group to Richards, his days at the head of the Stones table were now going to be officially over.
It's no secret that Brian and Keith never got along. They never did. But with me, Keith sometimes used to say, look, he's in trouble, you better go and help him. You better get him out of trouble or look after him, keep your eye on him. Well, to me, that's not being hard, that's being, like, nice about it, you know. But unfortunately, Brian, he got in such a state, he just couldn't get it together, he couldn't hack it. He just could not do it. He fell apart. But I had a lot of respect for Keith.
It was very important to us, the fact that we were going to go back out on the road behind a new record, that we resolved this thing with Brian. So Mick and I had to go down and sort of tell Brian virtually, like, hey, Cock, you're fired. Yeah, the fact that he was expecting it made it kind of easier, I guess, you know, that he wasn't surprised, and I didn't really even think he took it all in. He was already up in the stratosphere, you know. It was kind of like, hey, yeah, but there was no serious way that we can consider going on the road with Brian.
Jones was replaced by young guitarist Mick Taylor, and the band resumed work on their next album. Yet only a month after firing him, Brian Jones was found dead in his swimming pool.
I was at Olympic Studios the night that death happened, and Tom Keelock, who was their minder, appeared about 2 o'clock in the morning, and the word went round the studio that something had happened down at the farm and that he died in the swimming pool. And at first I wasn't being told about it. I was in the control room looking out into the studio, and I could see these little groups quite seriously talking together, and Charlie came in at one point quite tearful, and Marianne was there and she was very tearful. Keith came up to me and said, you don't report this. You don't say anything to anybody until we've told the family. Right, and it's going to take at least a couple of days. So I said, of course not. Promise. And I didn't. But I had the scoop of a lifetime, because I was the first journalist to know about it, 1 hour after he died. But you don't break a promise to Keith.
Nobody was really that surprised, too. There are people, I mean, I'm sure that everybody's got those feelings about certain people. Everybody knows people that you just have that feeling about they're not going to be 70 years old ever, you know. Not everybody makes it, you know.
The death didn't faze the Stones, however, and they pressed forward with the new album. The musical scene in 1969 was changing, and American groups like the Byrds and the Band were bringing country music back to the mainstream. One of the key figures in this country revival was Gram Parsons, who had formed one of the first country rock bands, the International Submarine Band, and was now the leader of a new outfit, the Flying Burrito Brothers. He had met Keith in 1968, and the two had become very close. Whereas Keith was well versed in blues and rock and roll, Gram had an encyclopedic knowledge of country, and over the following few years his influence would be heard prominently in the Stones' output.
He may feel all your charms. He may hold you in his arms, but I'm the one.
I started to find out his incredible knowledge of music, country music specifically. You know, since we were obviously, we hooked right away as friends. The next thing being musicians, that we started to find out about what we knew about music, what we liked.
There's no barriers here with Keith, and country music was a basic music from America's past, just the same as the blues was. And you know, Graham Parsons played him some really good examples, and obviously Graham Parsons was a completely unique, soulful performer, and Keith picked up on that. The two were great mates and taught him a lot. But then Keith taught Graham about rock and roll, so there was like a cultural exchange. I mean, Graham Parsons was horrifying the country diehards with his rock and roll. Though the rednecks hated that, and I mean, just the same as probably some Stones fans thought, what are they doing with country honk?
I don't think that country people like this stuff very much at all at the beginning, but then you know, then what happens in country music is that, you know, basically Nashville is the conservative wing of American popular music. So now what you have in, you know, what's the great repository of AOR musicians? Nashville. There's, you know, all these people walk into the studio who plays the same kind of stuff that the Rolling Stones would have played 30 or 40 years ago and do it real well. They've listened to the Rolling Stones. They're all Rolling Stones fans. And they're all Keith Richards fans, I'm sure.
Despite this new country flavour, on the Stones' next album, Let It Bleed, Richards continued to push his new musical vision forward. And although influences were being drawn from a variety of areas, the Stones' sound was totally unique.
I mean, I think that Keith was creating something new. He was just foregrounding the guitar. The guitar came first, and the grooves and the fills and the vocal lines worked around the guitar riffs. It was new because it was more assertive. No one had really ever played rhythm guitar like that before. You'd had a rhythm guitar and you'd had lead guitar, but you hadn't really had rhythm guitar sort of played as lead. I mean, that's one of the points about the Stones, is that, you know, the rhythm guitar is in a sense the lead guitar instrument, and the lead guitarists that have worked alongside Keith have in a sense been more marginal or just complementary. I mean, you think of something like Monkey Man on Let It Bleed. That's one of the most sort of foregrounded rhythm riffs in the history of the electric guitar. It's a riff played almost as a lead melodic line, and so I don't think anyone had ever really done that before.
The album showed that Jumpin' Jack Flash and Beggar's Banquet weren't a one-off. It showed that the Stones had staying power, and they could sustain it, and in fact they were getting better and better, and you know, they were in their pomp.
Despite this rise to prominence, the year 1969 ended very badly for the band. The final show of their North American tour at the Altamont Speedway was a large free concert that should have seen in the coming decade. But the disastrous use of the Hells Angels as security led to a night of violence in which one fan was murdered.
Keith, I mean, he'd got there the night before. It started off good for him. I mean, he always says, yeah, I had a great time. You know, he took some acid up on the hill with his little gang of people he was with. He hung out with the kids. He got in the mood, and